Please welcome on to the show a very special guest, the high school sports editor for the Pittsburgh Post Gazette, Mike White. Mr. White, how you doing today?
I'm okay, guys. How are you? It's my pleasure to be on with such legends like yourself.
Wow.
High praise.
Hey, you guys, you guys have been at my house. So let's let the audience know that I've known you since you were kids. And hey, kudos to you guys for what you've done with the Loyal Sons. I mean, you're a lot smarter than all three of you look, and you've done a great job of really having this thing take off. So kudos to you guys.
Look at us, just four very highly thought of North Hills alums in the community.
That's right. I don't know about four, but we are North Hills alums.
There's one North Hills Hall of Famer in this Zoom call right now.
And let the audience know that Dylan Mitchell is a former player of mine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Played under Coach White. Could have never done this without you. I'd like to think that.
And he hated his coach at that time.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, maybe you planted the seeds for me to pursue some type of some sports media career back when we were practicing in the dungeon. You told me basketball wasn't in my future. Just kidding. You never said that, Coach White. You were great.
Hey, you ended up being a pretty good high school player, but good for you.
So
now look at you.
Look at me now.
Now look at all you guys. And who knew that John Cotton, I went to high school with his dad, and who knew everybody called him Moses. So Moses,
listening right now, he'll love that.
That's right.
Out.
Okay, what are we talking
about?
Nicknames.
Yeah. So thank you for getting the disclosures out of the way. We've known you forever. We are very good friends with your youngest son, Danny. And if I call you Mike White today, it'll be the first time I ever have done it to your face. So if I slip up, that's why. But speaking of names for you specifically, there's something we want to clear the air about to start. Some around the Pitt community have this sense that you have an allegiance to a school in the middle of the state. Are you aware of what the Pitt comment and discussion boards call you?
No, never heard of it. What do they call me?
You've never heard of the nickname Mike Blue and White?
Yeah. No. No. Seriously, it's it's kind of a bewildering topic to me. And it does go back a ways. I don't get it as much now because there was a time, and I'll try to be not long-winded on this. There was a time at the Post Gazette, and from the mid 80s through probably the mid 90s, where I covered Pitt, Penn State, and West Virginia recruiting. Anytime they got a recruit, I wrote about them. I don't know how I did that really back then. But this is a subject that's, I think, somewhat interesting. Recruiting coverage is so different nowadays than it was back in the 80s. I mean, you're talking, there was no internet back then. And it was, there was a Pittsburgh Press back then, and we used to battle for getting commitments. And how you got them was really by word of mouth. For example, you would find out, local kids were easy to find out about because, you called them, you had their numbers, you knew who was visiting, blah, 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 blah. But you had to have contacts, and you would get contacts. Like when I started covering recruiting in the 80s, if I would find out, that someone visited Pitt from New Jersey, from a high school in New Jersey. Well, I would find out a newspaper in that maybe covered that school, call that newspaper, try and talk to their sports writer, say, hey, you know anything about this kid? And he'd say, blah, 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 blah. And I said, you got the coach's phone number. You got the coach's phone number. We talk him, call him, word of mouth. Hey, you visited Pitt? Yeah. And it was just like word of mouth. Or that newspaper in New Jersey wrote about him committing to Pitt 3 days earlier, but we didn't know about it because there was no internet. So it was so different and so actually a lot more work. I mean, the guys who cover recruiting now, it's easy. I mean, you follow Twitter and, Rivals and those that they put the stuff on there and, they do all the work for you. And it was so different back then. I'll tell you a real fast story of how you find out about kids recruiting. I found out that Pitt was recruiting a kid named Ken Ferguson from Texas, was a really highly recruited quarterback. Somehow I got the coach from a newspaper. I got the coach's phone number. He gave me the kid's phone number. I called the kid and he said, yeah, I visited there this weekend. And I said, oh, did you really? I said, any other kids visit with you? He said, yeah, there were some kids here. I said, do you know any of their names? He said, yeah, Tony Dorsett's son was visiting there with me from Texas. And nobody knew Tony Dorsett's son was being recruited by Pitt because he was in Texas. That's how I found out about that. So it was very different back then. But anyway, getting back to the blue and white thing. So how it really all started, I was covering all those, Pitt, Penn State, and West Virginia. And it's funny to me because in the late 80s, when Mike Gottfried was a coach, Bud Ratliff was recruiting coordinator, Sal Sunseri was there, and they were having some great recruiting classes with Sean Gilbert, a kid named Mike Chalinsky. They were like top 5 or 10 in the country. Lou Riddick, and I would write about it. Whoever they got, and I gave them all kind of kudos. And Bud Ratliff, I remember he took me out to dinner because of everything. He was a recruiting coordinator, and then started going downhill a little bit. And Johnny Majors came in for the second time, and looking back, their recruiting was terrible. They didn't have players. Their team stunk. They weren't getting highly thought of recruits, and Penn State was getting a lot of recruits, big time recruits. So I would write about Penn State recruits. They got this guy, they got that guy. They're, Pitt fans didn't like that. So they started saying I was a Penn State fan. And I don't know. All I was doing was writing about who Penn State got. It wasn't my fault that they were getting a lot better recruits than Pitt got. And it bore out because Pitt, hey, be honest, during those Majors years, they stunk. So they started saying, I have allegiance to Penn State. Hey, I knew Tom Bradley. We had a good relationship. I knew some Pitt coaches too, but it started from there. It kind of boggled my mind. And, I never, you can ask I know Greg Gattuso, and I'm being long-winded. When he was on staff at Pitt, oh, he's the best. We go way back. We used to play summer basketball together. We still stay in touch. He's one of the funniest human beings I've ever met. When he was on staff at Pitt, like those Pitt people would say about me in Penn State. And he said, I know him. I've been to his house. I've never heard him say one thing like he likes Penn State or anything. And I'll tell you one story of how ridiculous it was up the ladder, how it even went. And I thought this was ridiculous. I know I'm really talking long, but you want a story? Here's one. When Pitt got Shady McCoy, okay, he committed. He was at a prep school because he got hurt his senior year at Bishop McDevitt. So I got, that he committed. And I called up Greg. Greg Gattuso gave me Shady McCoy's phone number. And I had a story ready. Called Shady McCoy, didn't call me back. Called him twice, didn't call me back. The Trib wrote a story on him, a big recruit. I wrote a smaller story. I didn't have any quotes from him. And the next day or 2 days later, I talked to Greg, and Greg, it's honest to God truth, said Dave Wannstedt is ticked off at me because it's honest to God truth. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because Dave Wannstedt said Mike White showed his allegiances again. He only wrote like 7 paragraphs on Shady McCoy, and the Trib wrote 13 or 14. And I was like, are you serious? Dave once said the head coach is worried about paragraphs that was written on a recruit. And hey, Shady McCoy never called me back. I'm not going to call him 98 times. So, but that's an example. So it became Mike Blue and White, whatever.
I mean, hey, we were talking before we started recording here, and for those people watching on YouTube, you can see there's some pictures behind you. We've got old Pitt Stadium hung up on the wall. We've got
Pitt Stadium right there.
We got Three Rivers. There's no Beaver Stadium up there, is there?
No, there's Pitt Stadium, Three Rivers, Heinz Field, PNC Park, and Forbes Field. No Beaver Stadium.
That's exactly what a spy for Jim Franklin would want us to think.
Well, yes. And here's the other thing. Like, I'll be honest with you, there, in this job, sometimes, like, there are some kids and players over the years that I became close with, just because I did so much with them the top players. And, when you do so much on a kid that maybe play more than one sport, sometimes you establish a relationship with them. And that's one of the things in my job over the years that I've really liked. And some of those guys went to Penn State that I had relations, like LeVar Arrington. I mean, he's from North Hills. We were very close, still stay in touch. And Brandon Short was one of the best kids I ever covered. And so was LeVar. So I had relationships with them, and they went to Penn State, so I kind of stayed in touch with them. But I had relationships too with like Tyler Pelko. I mean, still stay in touch with him. But and I think people would read things into it all the time. And really what it comes down to, Pitt fans didn't like if I wrote about Penn State and I wrote about their recruits that they were getting were good. They thought I wasn't, I should be building up Pitt's recruits more. I don't know. I always said you can tell a lot of times a recruit, you put in who he chose and who he chose them over. And that will tell you a lot about the recruits. And back then, and then a number of Johnny Majors recruits in his second time around chose him over Miami, Mid-American Conference schools. It wasn't like Michigan. So that's kind of how it came to be. But I don't seem to get it as much anymore because I don't, our Pitt writer covers any recruits outside Pittsburgh. Our Penn State writer, we don't have a Penn State writer anymore, but I don't do much with Penn. I don't do anything with Penn State recruiting anymore unless a kid from here goes to Penn State. So I talked a lot. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's great. And now you're on the Loyal Sun show. You've been featured in our tailgating content. So at this point, Penn State fans might start getting mad at you if you keep hanging out with us. So, but we got you on here, and I've heard hundreds of stories from you over the years about local players, back when you worked the Dapper Dan Roundball Classic. Like, you have stories and more about high school sports around this area than anyone. So we got to ask you about some of these guys, these local guys who are going to end up at Pitt. One guy I wanted to ask particularly about, there's a certain quarterback from the WPIAL right now, a kid named Julian Duggar at Penn Hills who committed to Pitt. Was kind of a weird recruiting, at least from a Pitt fan standpoint. It was more of like they were recruiting a few out-of-state quarterbacks, maybe thought Duggar was more of an athlete, and now eventually extended that offer, and now he's Pitt's 2024 quarterback commit. What can you tell us about him? I mean, I saw him play out at North Hills a few weeks back. North Hills didn't put up.
Yeah, he had a good game. He had a good game.
He had a big game. But like, from what you've seen from him, what kind of players Pitt getting? What kind of quarterback are they getting more so?
Well, I will say one thing right now. He is a heck of an athlete. And Dylan, a lot of times I've learned over the years, I love seeing football recruits, what they're like on the basketball court. And I know some other college football coaches who kind of felt the same way. On a football field, if you only see a guy in a game once, you don't really get the full extent of maybe his athletic ability. Where on the basketball court, you see a football recruit, you can see a lot. You can see a lot of whether he may be stiff-legged a little bit, or just athleticism, quick second jump, or and not basketball ability, but just athletic ability. And I've seen Julian Duggar play basketball, and there is definitely some athletic ability there, a lot of athletic ability, and pretty good size. As far as a quarterback, I'll be 100% honest with you. I think he has improved greatly since last year. He still needs a lot of refinement, I think, yet. And I'm just being 100% on. I think he's very good, but I think if he's going to be a quarterback at Pitt's level, it will take at least 3 years or so before he could be a serviceable. Yeah, I think he just has that much learning and maybe that much refining. He's done a good job. I think he's gotten better as a passer over the years. But I like his mobility. But I think as a passer, he's still got a little bit of a ways to go. I hate to say it, and maybe he'll be patient enough that he will be a quarterback someday. But boy, I'll tell you what, with the body he has, with the frame he has, and he could easily put on 25 pounds. Man, he would make maybe a great H-back or a great rush end or something like that with that athletic ability. And I've seen a basketball go wham, two-hand jams and things. And speaking of that, that's what I think of him. And I'll tell you a story about players in basketball ability if you like stories. And this is a honest to God true story about Rob Gronkowski. And when I was convinced that he was going to be, now I didn't know he would be everything he was, but his senior year, he caught, I think, 9 passes. Okay. And I saw him play in person once or twice, and Woodland Hills never threw the ball. So, right. And when you're covering a game, you're not watching the tight end that much. You're watching who has the ball, who has the carries. So, and I knew he was decent blocker too, but you never saw him really go out for passes much. So my middle son was a sophomore, and they played Woodland Hills in basketball. And I went to the game with my wife, my wonderful, beautiful wife, Daria White. Give her a shout out. And
shout out Mrs. White.
So we are sitting in the stands, and I watched my son Sean play the JV game. He was a sophomore. And here comes Woodland Hills out to warm up. And Gronkowski was a really good basketball player. And he's warming up. And I know he's going to Arizona. He'd already committed. This is January senior year. And I'm watching him warm up. And you weren't allowed to dunk in warm-ups, but he's going up, turning around, doing 360s way above the rim and just dropping the ball in. And I'm watching him, the athletic ability and the jumping ability. And about a quarter of the game, North Hills had a kid that was about 6'4", 6'5". I think he was scared to death of him. And I saw like a jam on him, Gronkowski, and his second jump, and he was making moves that were like, I turned to my wife. I said, honest to God, true story. That's when I was convinced Rob Gronkowski was for real. I turned to her and said, hey, you see that kid out there, number whatever he was, 40? Yeah. I said, he'll be in the NFL someday. And she said to me, how do you know? And I said, because there aren't kids around 6'5", 6'6" that can do on a basketball court what he's doing right now. Now, I didn't know he'd be one of the best tight ends ever, but that's an honest to God true story. He was amazing, the athletic ability on the basketball court.
I remember you telling me one time about a certain opponent of ours, Malik Hooker, when he was at Newcastle. I remember you telling me that the way he moved on a basketball court and the way he was built reminded you of how Darrelle Revis moved on a basketball court in high school. That sticks out to me because obviously Malik Hooker went on to be a first-round pick, and I was like, dang, Darrelle Revis? And yeah, playing against a guy like that in basketball. I mean, what was it like watching Darrelle Revis play football and basketball?
Without a doubt, he had the 3 best days of any athlete in the history of WPIAL Western Pennsylvania sports, any sport. The 3 best days, 72 hours, was incredible. And I don't know, and I've said it, I've written it. I don't know if people really realize what he did over those 72 hours. And here it is real fast. They were in the state championship in football. He The game was Neil Walker's senior year. It snowed like 8-9 inches on Friday. So they played the games Friday. Neil Walker played in like 8-9 inches, one of the most memorable games they lost in overtime. They canceled Saturday's games, postponed them to Sunday. So Aliquippa played Sunday, and Rivas had one of the best all-around performances ever in any state championship game. He scored 5 touchdowns. I think he scored 3 different ways. He had a running touchdown, a reception. He picked up a blocked field goal, ran it for a touchdown. I think he intercepted one pass. He threw 1 or 2 passes. He had so many yards rushing. He just did everything. It was one of the best performances ever in a state championship game, and I'm not the only one who said that. So that was Sunday. Tuesday, I'm at a banquet that they're honoring Aliquippa, a luncheon, and I see him there with his teammates, and I said, "Are you playing tonight?" They were playing Beaver Falls, their rival in basketball, that night. He said, "Yeah, I'm playing." I said, "Oh, okay." And I went down. Now, this is 2 days after football. Now, you probably got to be sore. No practice. Went and shot Monday.
Especially after 5 touchdowns.
Yeah. And playing offense and defense, doing everything. He scored 38 points against Beaver Falls 2 days later. Dylan, John, David, I'm telling you right now, I don't think people realize the athletic ability to do that at that. Yeah, you can go out and play that basketball game 2 days later. I mean, Aliquippa guys have done that 2 days later. But to go out and do what he did, 38 against a really good team in overtime. They had Lance Jeter. It was amazing. Amazing. Best 3 days any Western Pennsylvania athlete ever.
I buy it. Darrell Rivas seems like someone who might have been athletic.
Just a little. So is Malik Hooker. Dylan, do you remember your senior year?
Oh, he remembers. He remembers.
Do you remember your senior year? You guys played, and you were playing with my son at Newcastle. And Hooker would do one thing every game where I just would go, "Oh, my Lord." And I don't know if you remember this play. It wasn't a dunk or anything. I think Danny might have even thrown you the pass. He threw it like 3/4 court. You were open, I think, and he threw it, and like he threw it a long pass in the air, and like Hooker came out of nowhere and like seemingly jumped up into the rafters and just took this ball out of the midair. And I just, it was a play. Your jaw dropped. Do you remember that play?
So I don't know if we're talking about the same play, but I know there was a play where I threw a pass and they would press
maybe you
us,
throw
right?
it to Danny.
And I see whoever it was, if it was Danny or whoever up the court, and I'm like, oh, he's wide open, so I'm just going to throw a normal chest pass. And I knew where Malik was, but he was so far away that it didn't. I was like, oh, I can get this to Danny, and I threw a normal chest pass like I normally would. And if we were playing any other kid in Western Pennsylvania, Danny would have got the ball and we would have broke the press. Right. Instead, Malik Hooker jumps out of the air, grabs it, the whole crowd oohs and ahs, and they probably go down and get an easy bucket. That's exactly what happened.
That's it.
Yeah, it was just every time you came across him, he was doing something else, like something. I remember the first time we played him, and not to go on a rant about Malik Hooker now, but I remember going at him on a fast break and getting an and-1 and thinking I was big shit. Like I just got an and-1 on Malik Hooker. Very next possession, I came down, tried to go reverse layup, and he pinned you. He pinned it so hard off the backboard that I thought the ball was going to pop. And I don't think I ever got a bucket in Malik's vicinity again. So
Ralph Blundo has told me Malik Hooker to this day will tell you the best times of his athletic life were at Newcastle and winning that state championship his senior year over Ohio State, over NFL right now. That he will tell you. Ralph Blundo has told me that. So, and I think he said that the most memorable time was pinning Dylan Mitchell ball on the backboard.
Yeah,
gotta be top 3 at least.
You think he knows? You think he knows your name?
I doubt it. So I actually, for listeners, this might be a surprise, but I went to Ohio State my freshman year of college, and I walked by Malik just on like a Saturday night or something, like walking down High Street in Columbus. And I was like, Malik, yeah, I played for North Hills. And the way he looked at me, I was like, yeah, he has no clue who I am. So no, I'd say no, he doesn't know.
All right.
You were just a nameless, faceless victim.
Yeah. I'm probably not the first person he pinned, and definitely not the last. So
why hasn't John Cotton said anything in this conversation yet?
I was waiting for
the conversation on
for
track
me
and
to
field.
stop talking. Yeah.
Yeah, I never got pinned by Malik Hooker, so
okay.
Well, then, Squid, why don't you take it away? You have the next question.
All right. Well, do we want to go to the man of the bye week, Phil Dracovic?
Ha.
What a saga that has been.
What do you want to know?
Well, where do we start? I mean, I think we talked about it at tailgate. Like, did you think that it could get this bad this quick, or
Heck,
what were the
no.
highs and lows? And here we are.
No. And I'll go back. In my 40 years of covering WPIAL football, I still would put him in the top 5 players all time in the last 40 years. I am, first off, I'll say, I talked about getting to know people and close to people. I had a great relationship with Phil, and I knew his dad. I've known his dad for ages. Used to play summer basketball against him at North Park, and I've known him a long time. Great family, tremendous family. And Phil's a tremendous kid, one of the best I've ever covered. And it pains me to see what has happened to him. It bewilders me. I am confused. I don't understand it. I've never seen anything like it, really. I just will tell you that I don't know what happened. But he's not the same quarterback that even he was in high school. Obviously, you change a lot from high school to college, and it's not the same. But I mean, I went and looked back at stories that I did on him after he started off so rough. I mean, the high school stats don't mean everything, but after the semifinals of WPIAL playoffs, he set a record for most yards in a playoff game with like 400 and some. He had over 300 passing, over 100 rushing. And there's quotes from Art Walker, Van A, who's been around, knows a few. I mean, he was talking about him playing on Sundays probably. And, I actually thought that too. But sometimes, I don't know. I remember talking to Phil before he left, and I sent him a text his freshman year at Notre Dame, or maybe his sophomore year, and we talked about that. And I said, Phil, at some point, whether it's an injury or whatever, almost every kid, no matter how good they are, faces some adversity in college. And how are you going to handle it? And what are you going to deal with it? And I sent him that text in his freshman year. I think it was his freshman or sophomore year. And he said, yeah, I got to deal with it. I don't know what I'm going to do. But, then he went to Boston College, and he had a really good first year. You look at his stats. I mean, I watched a number of their games. Then last year, I mean, they were terrible last year. I watched 3 or 4 of the games. He was getting killed. I don't know. I went to 2 of the games this year live in person, watched the other ones. He doesn't throw the ball, in my eyes, like he used to. He obviously doesn't run like he used to. And even his dad, we talked in the summer, said he's not as athletic as he once was, but he didn't need to be. He just need to extend plays. I mean, he was a freshman at basketball. He'd drive along the baseline, jump up, and 2-hand over the head jam. Yeah. Great mid-range jumper for someone who didn't put that much time into basketball. The second jump and the jumping ability, and I don't know. I don't see the zip. I didn't see the zip on the ball that he used to have. And it, I don't know. I don't know if he just lost so much confidence. Did he get beat up at Boston College too much? Was he overweight? He was 240 pounds, close to 250, I think, at one point this summer.
It's pretty crazy.
I don't know.
I think we all thought.
I'm bewildered.
I think
and I feel
back
so
in
bad
high school.
because he's such a good kid.
Yeah, I think back in high school, we might be all a little bit biased towards the WPIAL guys that go off to college, but I think everybody thought that this was a different level of quarterback that we've seen.
I remember that they played Wayne High School the first game of his senior year, and Wayne was supposed to be pretty good. They were really good the year before from Ohio. In the
It was
second or
on
third,
ESPN, right? It was a
yeah,
ESPN game.
yeah,
I was there.
yeah.
I was there.
Dylan, you remember the second or third play? He took the ball around the corner and just outran everybody. Defense is like zoom down the sideline, touchdown, like 70 yards. And high school stats, they really don't mean a lot, but you look at his stats, the number of yards he rushed for and threw for, but it's not the stats. It's just how he did it also. And I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't know what happened. It's almost like the first Space Jam. You remember when the Monstars came out and they took Charles Barkley's talent and Patrick Ewing and Muggsy Bogues. And I don't know. Did the Monstars come down to Phil? I don't know. But he's the type of kid he is. And I talked to Eric Kasparovich last Thursday night, this tight end thing. I think he just wants to play because you really, when you think about it, if he's a number 3 quarterback, is he saying, I'm done. My football career's over. This is it. I'm done. And that's why maybe he said, can I play tight end? I'd give him a shot. I don't think he's not as good as Bartholomew or anything, but he has size. I think he has pretty good hands, and who knows? Stranger things have happened. Who'd have thought this would have happened to him? So watch, he'll be in the NFL as a tight end. Watch.
Yeah, he'll have a game-winning touchdown against Notre Dame in his revenge game down in South Bend.
Yeah, there you go.
They'll lift him up like Rudy. To move past Phil, because he's been the topic of this entire football season, we do want to look to the future a little bit because Pitt's 1-4.
I don't know. I don't know. Hey, wait a second. I don't know if he ever listens to your Loyal Son show, but I want to give a shout out to him. He's still all A1 in my book. Go ahead.
Well, we can even screenshot that and send it to him, and maybe he'll decide to listen one day.
But he shouldn't. He should not. He should not. We haven't recorded the rest of this episode, but I know exactly how it's going to go, and he should not listen.
Yeah, we'll just cut that little clip for him. But like I said, Pitt's 1-4 right now. We would like some hope for the future, and part of that is recruiting. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these local kids in the WPIAL right now, and maybe if a genie came to us, the WPIAL genie, and had us rub the lamp and asked us, our one wish, very oddly enough, could only be granted on getting one of the local football players to commit to the University of Pittsburgh. Who would be the guy right now in the WPIAL?
Are you talking about guys that have even committed to other places, or are you talking about guys who haven't committed that they're juniors and sophomores and freshmen?
Let's leave out the commitments.
Let's leave out all the guys that Penn State dusted us for. Just the remaining.
Because out of all those guys, the guy that I really like, just real fast, is Cole Sullivan from Central Catholic. He was a nobody up until last year, and he just took off. Really showed a lot last year. He's about 6'3" or so, and he's only about 210, but he has a frame to put on a lot more. And I've seen him twice in person, and he was dominant both times. Obviously, he was not too dominant against Pine Ridge on Friday. But I really, I did a player of the half year. I picked him the player of the half year than WPIAL because he was that good. Right? Yeah, he's going to Michigan. As far as seniors, there isn't anybody left that's like, I don't even know if there's a Power 5 guy left that hasn't committed. You know what? Tyree Alualu, he might go Power 5, but I don't think Pitt's really in it with him. Probably both ways. I don't even know if they offered, but he's probably the only guy left in the senior class that would be Power 5. Going down below, Tyke Hayes did commit to Penn State. I want to see more of him. I want to see what he's like next year. I think he could be good, but I'm not going to go out and say he's going to be tremendous. Boy, I think your best guys out of the junior class, I think your best guys you might hope for would be from your sophomore class, or even, I don't ever remember this, football recruiting is done so much earlier than ever before. Right. But I don't ever remember this many sophomores and freshmen at WPIAL having Power 5 offers already. I did a story on them, a number of the kids that sophomores and freshmen, they're all over the place. I'm trying. The one guy you'd probably like a guy. I would. Boy, we're known for quarterbacks, but I don't really see a great quarterback out there right now. I know this kid from Fort Chariots, a sophomore, Matt Sig, who I really like as an athlete. Pitt and Penn State just both offered him, and he's going to have ridiculous stats by the time he's done. Not so sure he'll be a quarterback and in the future. He's a really good athlete. And I'm not so sure he won't be a baseball prospect. Boy, that's a tough question, Dylan. Monty Christian has David Davis and a linebacker that Penn State really wants. And if I had to guess, he might go to Penn State. There's the kid at Cannon, Davion Taylor. I'm hearing a lot about this Khalil Taylor from Seton LaSalle as a freshman. But I don't think out of that group of sophomores and freshmen, and this isn't to cut them down, there's a lot of good players, but I don't see like a top 50 player in the country in their class amongst all those players. So Quentin Martin's, whatever he is, 55 or something like that. I don't see a player like that. But so I don't have an answer for you. I don't think there is one guy that you would go, we got to have this guy. We got to have him no matter what. Sorry, I don't have one of them. Keyshawn Robinson, Westinghouse, interesting. He's another sophomore.
Colorado and USC came calling for him.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good offers. He's going to be a defensive back probably. Can play receiver too, but and you say about Pitt and Penn State, David, Penn State dusting. I've said this before. In the history of recruiting, now in recruiting, in the future of recruiting, Pitt is never, ever, ever before, now, or in the future going to get every best kid from WPIAL. And that's not the worst thing. Penn State recruits here too. So does Michigan and other places. But do you really, I've got some numbers here. I can look them up. Do you really, is it that important anymore to clean up in Western Pennsylvania? Guys, hate to tell you this, but at the most, we have 8 to 10 Power 5 guys every year now. I mean, 2 years ago, we had the fewest number of FBS recruits ever in the history of the WPIAL. So, it's nice to get those local guys, but I think Pitt has some other guys that if they don't get from local area, from other areas that are right behind them, that they think are pretty good too. But I'm just going to look up and tell you here, from 1986 to 2023, Pitt got 190 recruits from the WPIAL and City League. Penn State got 69. So that just tells you that they've never gotten all the best recruits. It's not the end of the world. Since then, Notre Dame has gotten 22 recruits from 86 to 2023. West Virginia, 63. Besides Pitt, Penn State, and West Virginia, who do you think, quiz time, and you're going to be shocked at this, from 1986 to 2023, which is 35, 37 years, who do you think, besides Pitt, Penn State, West Virginia, has landed the most WPIAL City League recruits?
Is it Notre Dame?
No. They're second with 22.
Let's say like
I want to say Michigan, but
They are tied for fourth
Is it a Power 5
with
school?
17. Yes, it is.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Out of the Power 5 schools, Akron actually has had the most with 87. 87 Akron recruits. But
how many
out
did
of
you
the
say
Power
Pitt
5
had?
schools, Pitt had 190 from 86 to 2023. Penn State 69, West Virginia 63. Akron 87, Kent State 63. But number 2 is Notre Dame, and the Power 5 is 22. Who's number 1 with 10 more than Notre Dame?
Syracuse?
They are third with 21.
Wow.
USC?
I have to give you, I'll give you a hint. They used to be in the ACC.
Maryland?
Yes,
Wow.
with 32.
That was
Now,
not on my radar.
Nope,
now,
not even at all.
Now, they have 32. Doesn't mean that Pitt wanted all 32 of them. They might have taken kids that, Pitt didn't want. So, just throwing that out to you. Just a little Mike Blue and White trivia.
Well, that makes me feel a little bit better. Doesn't really change how Pitt's doing this year, and
No, it would be nice if they would. Yeah, it would be nice if you got the top players, or maybe 2 out of every 3, or at least half of them, which they haven't been. I think it helps that with interest in your own program. But you know what, Dylan? The way it is right now, though, the key for Pitt is how they develop kids that they get from outside the area. I used to cover West Virginia back in the 80s and 90s, and Don Nealon was tremendous at getting kids who were West Virginia they don't have any players in that state. They have like 2 or 3 Division I kids a year. Getting kids from other states out of the region who were maybe, they didn't have stars back then, but maybe like 3-star guys. And he turned them into 3 years or so, pretty dang good players. And next thing you know, West Virginia would be 9-2 playing in a big bowl, or they played for the national championship in '89 with Major Harris. He's a great example. Pitt wanted him mentioned to be a defensive back, and he went there and almost won the Heisman. So I think Pitt's fortunes, a lot are going to be how they develop and get kids outside the area, maybe even more than WPIAL.
And now the big part of it is getting guys in the transfer portal, like Donovan McMillan, Phil Dracovic,
without a doubt.
MJ Devonshire. The list goes on and on. So,
we'll stupid of me not to bring that up, but that's almost as key as the regular recruiting.
We might have to enter the transfer portal discussion and all of the boomerangs Pitt has got back home the next time you come on the show. But I take it you have some writing and scouting to do later this afternoon. Isn't that correct? You were telling us
some writing and scouting.
I don't know what to call it. I only went to journalism school for 4 years.
I got to go to an open gym for basketball.
Yeah, that sounds like both of those things. Aren't you going to scout the players and then
I'm not going to write about that, though, David.
All right,
write about that.
Hey, my apologies.
This is the guy, Dylan, who didn't know what a cooperative sponsorship was in high school. Do you remember that?
It took me a sec. It took me a second. All right.
Well, Coach White, I'm going to call you Coach. Appreciate you coming on.
I'm sorry if I was too long-winded. Maybe give you some. Didn't you want some other recruiting stories?
Well, if you've got the time, we've got the time. So you have.
I would say
up your sleeve.
I'll tell you 2 real fast. How recruiting used to be. Well, first off, when Terrell Pryor was in high school, oh my Lord, it was just the biggest question. Where's he? Hey, where's Pryor going? Where's Pryor going? I would get it everywhere. And this is the honest to God true story. I went out, this was about a month before he committed to Jeanette, to talk with him, to do a story on, where recruiting stood or whatever, met with him. And I came back Route 30, going on the turnpike to get on the turnpike. go through the gate, the toll booth, and I got on. A guy gave me the ticket at the toll booth. He obviously recognized who I was. I swear to God, he said to me, "Hey, where's he going?" At the turnpike.
What'd you tell him?
And I will tell you one other story. This is a basketball recruiting story. Real fast. It's I don't want to say who it is because I don't want to disparage them, but it was a I don't even want to say the school. I can say Shaler. And they were on a Danny Fortson was the main recruit. This wasn't him, but another guy. He was on a recruiting visit, and I don't say where. And I couldn't report this because it happened. They told me this years after. He was being shown around campus by one of the coaches, and there were two of his Shaler teammates there with him. And there was a coach, the assistant coach was showing him around campus. And like every 20 yards, the assistant coach would be walking and he'd drop a $20 bill out of his pocket. Say, "Oh, I dropped something." And they would pick it up and he'd go another 20 yards, drop another $20 bill, drop another $20 bill, not drop another $20 bill. So that's a story I'll always remember. And another story, here it's a Pitt story. Tom Tumulty was a great linebacker at Penn Hills. He committed to Pitt, okay? This is back when they didn't have the internet. I think it was mid-90s. And I called him up and to get an update, and he told me he committed that night. And I said, okay, this is when their paper, no internet. I had to write a story for the next day. And it was 9:00 at night. I only had about an hour and a half to do it. So he said, I don't want you writing the story until I tell all the coaches that his finalists. And I said, okay, are you going to tell them now tonight? He said, yeah, I'm going to call them right now. So I waited about a half an hour and he called me back and he said, hey, I can't get a hold of Michigan State, so I don't want you to write the story. I said, I got to write the story. You told me I need to beat everybody with this story. So he said, well, I can't get a hold of their coach. So I waited. I said, all right, I'll wait another 20 minutes, see if he calls you back. Waited 20 minutes, called him, never called him back. I said, who is the coach? And I forget the coach's name. He had ties to Western PA. I said, all right. I said, if I get a hold of him, can I write the story? He said, yeah, if you get a hold of him, and he wanted to be nice. He didn't want those coaches to read it that he's going to Pitt. So somehow through one contact or another, I got it in direct information. I think I got the coach's phone number, the assistant coach of Michigan State. I called him up and said to him who I was. I said, hey, can you please call Tom Tumulty? He knows where he's going to college, and he wants to tell you. Oh, really? Yeah. So he called him then. Then Tom said, all right, you can write the story. I told everybody. So I went as far as calling a coach to tell another kid, to tell him, please call this kid. He knows where he's going to college, so I can write a story. So that was kind of a crazy, that's what I'm talking about, how recruiting used to be. You know what else used to be popular in recruiting? And I had one, a 900 line where people paid $1.50 a minute to hear recruiting news. And there used to be national, as long as it's got true, they started out as sex lines. No lie, 900 sex lines. And somebody in recruiting world, this was in their mid-90s, got this idea of, you know what, we can sell recruiting news on a 900 line. So National Scouting Service would do it. And so I did one through the Post Gazette, and they advertised it. It was 1-900-434-HIKE was my number. And I would get on there, and you had 5 lines. People would pay $1.49 a minute. And you want information on Pitt, press 1. They'd press 1, and you'd hear me talking. Well, Pitt today landed a commitment. They landed, Darrell Rivas. from Aliquippa. He's a 6 foot, and also visiting this weekend was such and such. And I would play recordings of interviewing a recruit on there. And guys, it was the most unbelievable thing. People were so crazed on recruiting. We used to get reports of how much people spent on the line. There were some people from out of state that would stay on that line for because I had a Pitt line, a Penn State line, a local line, and a national line. They would stay on there for 20 minutes listening to all these things and pay $1.49 a minute. And they would do it daily. I mean, there were people spending $500 a month on recruiting news on a 900 line. And of course, it was $1.49 a minute. So I would talk today, Pitt got a commitment from Gurrera Law. Just to spread out the time. But there's another recruiting story. I told you how recruiting has changed.
I think my significant other, upon finding out I spent $500. No, I think, but if she found out that I spent $500 on a recruiting line, she would have preferred it had been a sex line.
Yes.
It was a recruiting line? That's kind of pathetic.
Well, you never know what some of those people were doing while they were hearing the recruiting. So it could have been recruiting and sex line in one.
What a
way to end things, huh?
What a way to cap this off.
That's kind of genius, though.
I'm never going to think of you the same.
It is, isn't it? Because there was no internet back then. And, no lie, I would call a recruit on the phone, tape him. I had a special phone. You could tape over the phone and then play it back through a recorder into the phone. And people used to like that. So I used to try to interview a kid for 10 minutes just so people would want to listen to all of it and pay $1.49 a minute.
I say that's a quick $12.50.
Whatever it takes.
Well, that's a heck of a way to end this. Coach White, can't thank you enough for coming on. I know.
Hey, thank you guys. I really thank you. And hey, seriously, what you guys have done, man. Who would have known that my son would have 3 friends who have gone to the lengths in what you had 3 become? Famous.
Z-list celebrities, some may say. But yeah, one of these days we'll get you down another tailgate. We'll talk a whole bunch of recruiting stories that you can't say on the air. Over a few icy lights. But we appreciate you, Coach White. We'll talk to you soon, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Squid. See you, David. See you, Dylan.
Thanks, Blue and White.